Welcome to the debate. We are looking today at the really harrowing choices facing the caretakers of the Shearwater Seed Vault. This is, of course, a globally significant repository, but now it's succumbing to the very catastrophe it was built to survive. The physical structure itself is failing. We're talking rising sea levels, flooding, and critically, concrete cancer compromising its integrity.
Yeah, and that failure really just demonstrates the ultimate vulnerability of these safeguards we put in place. I mean, when the structure designed to protect the world's genetic legacy starts to crumble, it highlights a pretty profound failure of planning, doesn't it?
It does indeed. And this imminent structural failure forces an absolutely agonizing triage. They have limited space and dwindling power to get the seeds evacuated to a smaller, hopefully less compromised facility on the mainland. So our central question today is this. When you're faced with this kind of zero-sum choice, should the priority be on, utilitarian species, things essential for immediate human survival, our staple food crops, or must the priority be preserving maximum genetic biodiversity, including all the specialized, non-essential, and rare plant life? Now, I'll argue that the immediate survival calculus really demands we prioritize those foundational, high-yield species, the ones that ensure food security and ecological reestablishment quickly.
See, I come at it from maybe a different angle. While, the pragmatic need for human survival is compelling, I think the true sort of long-term value of a global vault lies in protecting the diversity that underpins all complex ecosystems. We're not just saving food items here. We're saving the evolutionary code itself. So I maintain we have to prioritize preserving the rare, the unique, the ecologically significant species, the ones that actually guarantee future resilience, not just, immediate calories.
Okay, but the situation facing Dominic, Rowan, and their team it's immediate. It's existential. The physical details really underline the urgency. The cooling system shorted out, the temperature gauge is climbing, and Rowan notes that the concrete cancer means the vault wall might not even last another month. And outside the vault, the world is facing that triple threat of burn, drown, or starve. The contents must be moved, and I think they have to serve the primary goal of survival. Look at Hank's initial process. It was tormented, yes, but it focused first on food staples and then widened out to things of cultural necessity. This focus isn't cruel. It's just pragmatic.
That's an interesting point, though. I might frame that psychological and physical challenge a bit differently. Hank carried this enormous burden, as the text says, of deciding how to let biodiversity die in favor of what humans can eat. His initial list, which was huge, was meant to capture complexity, not just utility, precisely because reducing the planet's entire flora down to, mere calories risks creating a really dangerous, brittle monoculture after the collapse. We have to look beyond the immediate hunger pangs.
But resources dictate the strategy here, don't they? They're transporting these delicate samples to a smaller seed bank on the mainland. That inherently limited space, coupled with the accelerating degradation, waist-high water in the tunnels, dwindling power, it just demands that preference be given to species that are foundational and, frankly, easily cultivated. Saving thousands of niche species, many of which need highly specialized knowledge and conditions just to grow, that has to be balanced against the physical reality of the caretakers themselves and their own children surviving the coming years.
I'm just not fully convinced by that line of reasoning because, if we sacrifice the unique species now, we lose that long-term biological insurance policy. Isn't the whole mission to protect the entire tapestry of life? Consider Orly. He risked everything, including, bypassing security in the comms tower, specifically to select the strange and the unlikely. He chose things like the deadly pitcher plants, carnivores that, as the text puts it, refused to be prey, or the needle-leaf featherbush, Ulux palsia. These species, they embody complexity and the kind of natural defiance. They must be saved because they represent necessary resilience, and critically, because no one else would save them if the decision gets reduced purely to caloric utility.
Okay, let's try and focus on defining necessity in this specific, rapidly escalating triage environment. When the vault is literally flooding, necessity means edible or foundational, widespread species that can quickly sustain a human population and help stabilize the immediate environment. Orly's choices, like the Pterosymbium tinctorium, the Milembu seed, or that magnificent but very specialized Banksia grandis, they feel like, well, sentimental choices when people are facing starvation. Should the limited capacity, the actual physical shelf space, the energy expenditure be dedicated to these unique, often hard-to-grow species when foundational, widespread food sources are themselves at risk? We need to save the ingredients for a sustainable future, not just the biological curiosities, however fascinating they are.
Your definition of necessity, though, I think it's too narrow. It sort of assumes humans exist independently of the broader ecosystem they inhabit. We have clear evidence, right, there in the material, that seemingly non-staple species are actually foundational to system health. Take the common dandelion, Taraxacum officinale. Okay, it's classified as a weed, fair enough. Yet Orly details how its early spring bloom is absolutely essential for insects, birds, deer, and ultimately it sustains the wolf pack. And the wolves, in turn, manage the landscape, which allows the plants and trees of this land to grow. So if we only save easily cultivated crops, we break that entire cycle that maintains soil health, pollination, animal populations. These weeds are often the unsung drivers of large ecosystem health.
Right. I see why you emphasize the ecosystem services provided by widespread flora, like the dandelion. However, the dandelion is also an aggressively successful, incredibly widespread species. It's highly likely to reestablish itself naturally post-collapse, isn't it? Our finite resources, that precious space on the mainland, the dwindling coolant, they must be spent on mitigating the highest risk. The focus needs to be on securing the future of high-yield, proven crops that actually require intensive cultivation to survive. The ones that are not going to reestablish easily on their own. I mean, the Svalbard Vault flooding back in 2016 demonstrated that these systems can fail, and fail quickly. We need stability, right now. Saving specialized, delicate, or unique species is just a massive investment of scarce resources, knowledge, space, time. It really should be reserved for a later stabilization phase, not this desperate survival phase we're talking about.
But that strategy, prioritizing stability through a narrow list of high-yield staples, that's exactly the kind of thinking, the failure, that led to this catastrophic environmental collapse in the first place, the reliance on narrow genetic diversity. If we just revert to monoculture, we are absolutely doomed to repeat that vulnerability. The specialized nature of certain plants, conversely, that represents crucial evolutionary resilience, the kind we desperately need to preserve.
Could you maybe clarify what you mean by evolutionary resilience in this specific context? Because I see a difference between, say, historical resilience over millennia and immediate utility right now.
Certainly. What I mean is the biological blueprints for thriving in places that are, for all intents and purposes, unsurvivable. Think about the azarella. It's described as a dense, perennial herb that evolved these incredibly deep roots and a unique cushion form just to survive the savage winds on sub-Antarctic islands. Or the mangrove seed that possesses the ability to deliberately alter its density multiple times to find a suitable new home in shifting coastal zones. Saving the azarella isn't about saving a calorie. It's about saving the highly specialized genetic code for surviving genuinely prolonged hostile conditions, which is precisely what the post-collapse world is going to be like. If we only save the easily farmed species, we're basically throwing away the keys to future adaptation.
Okay, that's a compelling argument about specialized adaptation, I grant you that. However, adaptation takes generations. The immediate goal has to prevent mass human starvation and securing the basics of a temperate food chain. Focusing on specialized traits that might be necessary 100 years from now, when the temperature gauge is spiking right now and the physical integrity of the vault is actively compromised, that feels like a failure to prioritize the present emergency. And moreover, these specialized plants often rely on specialized pollinators or very specific microclimates. Cultivating them successfully in a new, unfamiliar mainland bank would require a massive expenditure of scarce knowledge and resources.
But we can't afford to discard the long-term solution just because the short-term problem is overwhelming. Your reliance on this immediate utilitarian calculation
this pragmatic imperative. It ignores the fact that fragility is bred from uniformity. Rowan's own observations about the collapse highlight this exact point. The loss of diversity made landscapes susceptible to fire, mirroring the way global agricultural homogeneity made us susceptible to environmental shocks. To only save high-yield staples is, I think, to guarantee a future landscape of vast, uniform, and ultimately easily threatened life. We absolutely must protect complexity, because complexity is strength.
Let's maybe pivot to the ethical burden of selection, because that's where the material makes the utilitarian mandate very clear, I think. The directive given to the caretakers was explicit. Keeping the seeds safe is more important than keeping ourselves safe. That responsibility, it implies a broad utilitarian mandate for the whole of humanity, not just, a philosophical preference for complexity. Dominic had to confront that terrible weight, the text says, of letting thousands of species go extinct in order to save the lives of my 3 children. This forces a moral choice toward maximizing life, which in this context means prioritizing plants that support broad life and human recovery.
I apologize, but I don't accept that this is a simple, cut-and-dried moral utilitarian choice. Hank struggled immensely with that very burden-reducing, all life simply to human utility. Orly's action, saving the non-stables, it acts as an ethical counter-movement against that reduction. It acknowledges that value exists beyond what we can immediately consume or use. We have a duty, I think, to safeguard the intrinsic value of life itself.
But Orly's actions, while yes, emotionally compelling, were also dangerous and fundamentally individualistic, weren't they? He had to go to pretty extreme lengths, bypassing security systems to ensure those specific, unique seeds were saved. When the entire mission depends on following protocol and moving the most viable, widespread assets first, using precious time and energy to secure a handful of specimens that are difficult to cultivate, that feels like a luxury the collapsing structure simply doesn't afford. It undermines the collective survival plan.
I disagree that it undermines the plan. I think it redefines the goal of the vault itself. From just an inventory of food to a comprehensive library of planetary life. Orly's selection of plants, like the Banksia grandis, the one that only releases its seeds after a fire, that shows a choice based on protecting life that requires and actually thrives under extreme circumstances. That's the very definition of evolutionary success in a scorched world. This resilience is what we need to bank on. And Orly explicitly stated, didn't he, when justifying the risk he took, that humans will likely survive in some form, but the unique plants won't, meaning their protection is paramount. Now that is a profound ethical choice, safeguarding the potential for a richer future over immediate, potentially limited utility.
Ultimately, though, we have to return to the concrete reality of the Shearwater seed vault. While preserving unique genetic code is, yes, a laudable ideal, the dire circumstances, the immediate physical collapse, the flooding, the rising temperature, and the harsh reality of a world facing mass starvation, it necessitates a utilitarian focus. The immediate goal must be to secure the future of life by prioritizing the essentials, even if that means accepting the truly tragic loss of unique diversity. We have to secure the ability to eat before we can afford the luxury of complexity.
And I maintain that the core value of the Shearwater Vault lies precisely in its role as the final insurance policy for the full tapestry of life. Ignoring the specialized, the unique, the so-called non-essential species is to surrender complexity and resilience. If we prioritize only stability and yield now, we risk guaranteeing a bleak future where only vast, threatened stretches of genetically uniform monoculture exist. To leave behind the plants that adapted to the unsurvivable place is, I believe, to deny the future the very biological tools it will need to thrive in the new world that's coming.
What we can certainly agree on, I think, is that this impossible dilemma, forcing caretakers to weigh the lives of their own families against the fate of specialized plants, is just a catastrophic outcome. The physical damage to the Shearwater seed vault, from the concrete cancer to the rising floodwaters, it makes this whole discussion of priorities tragically urgent.
And it really points to profound failures in global ecological management that created this awful zero-sum choice in the first place.
Yes, a tragedy magnified by the accelerating physical collapse. It absolutely forces us to confront the fact that in a crisis like this, our definitions of what constitutes necessary life become the last terrible line of defense.